They were vanishing. One by one, women with dreams, hopes, and lives of their own, gone. No goodbye, no trace, only to be found months, sometimes years later, buried beneath the cold sands of Gilgo Beach. Wrapped in burlap, their voices silenced by a killer hiding in plain sight. And while the nation watched in horror as the victim count grew, one man living a quiet suburban life just 30 miles away in Massapequa Park was collecting trophies. He was a father, a husband, and allegedly one of the most cold-blooded serial killers in modern American history. His name was Rex Heuermann. The story doesn't start with the killer. It starts with the women. Melissa Bartholomew was 24, bright-eyed, independent, and endlessly ambitious. She'd moved to New York from upstate, determined to carve out a life for herself in the city that never sleeps. She wasn't perfect. None of them were. Melissa worked as an escort to support herself, but that didn't define her. She loved animals. She called her little sister every single day. She wanted to go to school to become a hairstylist. Her life mattered. So when Melissa vanished in July 2009, the people who loved her knew something was wrong. She didn't just disappear. She was taken. And she wasn't the only one. Megan Waterman, Amberlynn Costello, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, all missing, all young women, all sex workers, all found eventually in the same chilling way, bound in burlap, dumped near the same desolate stretch of Gilgo Beach. And then came the calls. Melissa's younger sister, Amanda, began receiving them from Melissa's phone. A man's voice, cold, mocking, telling her that Melissa was dead. He laughed. He described things no stranger should have known. He was taunting them. And the police? They were watching a puzzle being laid out, piece by piece, with no edges and no idea who was playing the game. It was a humid night in July 2009 when Melissa Bartholomew stepped outside her Bronx apartment for the last time. The city was pulsing, headlights bouncing off buildings, the air thick with summer heat and unspoken secrets. Melissa had told her roommate she was going to meet a client. It wasn't unusual. She'd done it before. She took her purse, her cell phone, wore makeup, fixed her hair just right, the way she always did when she wanted to feel in control. But this time, she didn't come back. Her phone stopped answering. Her texts went unread. The hours turned into days, and no one seemed to know where she'd gone. Then came the chilling detail. Her cell phone remained active for days after her disappearance, but it wasn't near the Bronx anymore. It was moving through Midtown Manhattan and then south near Massapequa. Someone was using it, and soon after, they began calling her little sister. On the other end of the line was a man, calm, calculated. He used Melissa's phone to taunt Amanda. He described what he had done to Melissa, how he killed her, how her body would never be found. But it would. December 11th, 2010, over a year later, an officer conducting a routine canine training session along Ocean Parkway near Gilgo Beach stumbled on something strange in the brush. Wrapped tightly in burlap was a decomposed body. Small, female. Melissa Bartholomew. Within 48 hours, they found another, then another, then another. 4 women, lined up in a straight row, each wrapped in burlap, each left like garbage. The news exploded across the country. The term Gilgo 4 was born. But it had been happening for years. And whoever did this, they were methodical, they were patient, and they had no intention of stopping. Because by the time police had found Melissa, he had already moved on to his next victim.
The discovery of 4 bodies in less than a week rocked Suffolk County to its core. It was no longer a missing persons case. It was a mass grave. Authorities quickly realized they weren't dealing with a one-time offender. This was the work of a serial killer. But the question was, who? The Suffolk County Police Department launched one of the most extensive investigations in its history. Dozens of officers, hundreds of leads. Forensic teams combed the beach, searching every inch of sandy terrain. And then, just when it seemed like they had a profile, things got worse. They found more bodies. 10 sets of human remains would eventually be discovered along Ocean Parkway between 2010 and 2011. Not just women, but a toddler, a man in women's clothing, a pair of severed legs. Some victims were dismembered, others were missing for nearly 20 years. It was chaos. What had started with the Gilgo 4 now appeared to be the work of multiple killers, or perhaps one monster with a twisted, evolving MO. The FBI got involved. Profilers suggested the killer was organized, intelligent, possibly local. Someone with a strong knowledge of law enforcement procedure. Someone who could blend in. The pressure mounted. Families demanded answers. The media circled like vultures. But years passed, and nothing broke. Tips came in. Suspects were questioned, but no one fit all the pieces. Until a vehicle clue changed everything. One witness who had known Amber Lynn Costello recalled seeing a man outside her home the night she disappeared. Tall, broad, driving a dark green Chevy Avalanche. It was the first real lead in years, but it wasn't enough. Without a name, without DNA, without surveillance, it was like chasing a ghost through the fog. And while the task force scrambled to connect the dots, Rex Heuermann, he was going to work every day, taking the train to Manhattan, kissing his wife goodbye, and, allegedly, planning his next kill.
For over a decade, the Gilgo Beach case seemed like a cruel maze, twisting, repetitive, and unsolvable. Each time the public thought answers were near, the truth slipped further away. And while families mourned, investigators kept chasing ghosts. The first major suspect to capture national attention was a man named James Burke, the then chief of Suffolk County Police. He wasn't suspected of murder, but he was hiding something. When the FBI pushed to become more involved in the Gilgo Beach investigation, Burke pushed back hard, even going so far as to block their access for years. Why? Because Burke himself had a secret. In 2016, he was sentenced to prison for beating a man who had stolen a duffel bag from his vehicle, a bag containing sex toys, pornography, and law enforcement equipment. It was suspicious. Some wondered, was he trying to keep the FBI out because he was covering something up? Then came the whispers about Dr. Peter Hackett, a local physician who lived near Gilgo Beach. He'd inserted himself into the investigation early on, claiming he had taken in one of the victims, Shannon Gilbert, before she died. Her disappearance had initially led police to Gilgo Beach and to the discovery of the other victims. Hackett's involvement, his contradictions, his claims, felt off. He was strange. His timeline didn't match. And eventually, it was revealed that he had lied about ever contacting Shanann's family. Suspicious, yes, but ultimately not the killer. And then there were the online sleuths, bloggers, Reddit threads, people combing satellite images of Long Island, drawing connections between victims and ex-boyfriends, cab drivers, shady clients. Some blamed sex trafficking rings. Others pointed fingers at the police themselves. For years, the truth was buried beneath a mountain of theories, mistrust, and misinformation. Every few months, a new prime suspect made headlines, only to be cleared over and over again. Meanwhile, the real killer was still out there, blending in, living quiet, watching. Because sometimes the most dangerous monsters are the ones who leave no trail at all.
For over a decade, the Gilgo Beach investigation sat cold. 10 victims, no arrests, a community paralyzed by fear, a nation frustrated by silence. Then, in 2022, quietly and without fanfare, a new task force was formed, a small elite unit led by Suffolk County's newly elected district attorney, Ray Tierney. They weren't here to start over. They were here to finish it. And this time, they brought everything. Advanced forensics, digital mapping, cell tower analysis, and a fresh pair of eyes on every scrap of evidence. One of the first breakthroughs, the burner phones. Back in 2010, investigators knew the killer used throwaway cell phones to contact several of the victims, including Melissa Barthelemy. They traced those pings, mapped the calls. The patterns were oddly consistent. The phones always activated near Midtown Manhattan during the day and near Massapequa Park at night. Someone was living in the suburbs and commuting to the city every day, like clockwork. The task force began cross-referencing potential suspects, men who matched the physical description, men who owned green Chevy Avalanches, men who lived in Massapequa and worked in Manhattan. And then they found him. Rex Heuermann, a 6'4" architect, living just minutes from Gilgo Beach, working on Fifth Avenue in New York City. Married, father of 2, no criminal history, invisible. But when they looked closer, the cracks appeared. He owned a green Avalanche just like the one spotted near victim Amber Lynn Costello's home. And from his office, surveillance confirmed he matched the physical description witnesses had provided years earlier. But suspicion wasn't enough. They needed proof. So the task force did what they had never done before. They followed him. Closely. Patiently. And in early 2023, they got it. Agents recovered a discarded pizza box from Rex Heuermann's trash. Inside, a crust, licked clean except for one thing – DNA. When they tested it against the genetic material found on the burlap used to wrap the victims, it matched. Heuermann's DNA was found on at least one of the Gilgo 4. That single strand of hair, buried in the fibers of death, spoke louder than any confession ever could.
After nearly 13 years of haunting silence, the hunt ended. Rex Heuermann was arrested in the middle of bustling Manhattan, right outside his Fifth Avenue architecture firm. Broad daylight, suits and skyscrapers all around. He was quiet, almost annoyed.
The man who had evaded justice for over a decade was finally in handcuffs. And when the news broke, it spread like wildfire. TV anchors called him a family man. Neighbors called him weird but polite. But the police, they called him a predator. Authorities raided Heuermann's modest home in Massapequa Park, the same house he had lived in since childhood. What they found inside was a scene pulled straight from a psychological horror film. Dozens of locked safes, hundreds of weapons, assault rifles, handguns, knives, all carefully cataloged, a hidden room in the basement, and digital evidence that hinted at an obsession with sex workers, sadistic torture, and serial killers. Search warrants revealed that Heuermann had spent countless hours browsing violent pornography. He had burner phones, fake email accounts, and disturbing search histories, including how to dump a body and Gilgo Beach investigation updates. He was following the case, watching the coverage, reading about his own crimes for years. Investigators now believed Heuermann had been planning more murders. More burner phones had been discovered, fresh contact with new escorts. The pattern was beginning again. And all the while, his wife and children had no idea. They were out of town during the murders. They were out of town the day of the arrest. To them, he was just Rex, a quiet man, an architect, a provider. But behind the hollow eyes and the heavy frame was a cold, calculating killer who had wrapped his victims in burlap and buried them by the sea.
The arrest of Rex Heuermann brought relief, but not closure. He was charged with the murders of Melissa Barthelemy, Amber Lynn Costello, and Megan Waterman, 3 of the infamous Gilgo 4, and authorities say they have strong evidence linking him to Maureen Brainerd Barnes, too. But what about the others? What about the toddler, the dismembered man, the remains scattered miles away, the unidentified Jane Does whose names have never been spoken? Investigators now suspect that more than one killer may have been using Gilgo Beach as a dumping ground. And if that's true, Rex Heuermann might not be the only monster lurking in the dunes. His arrest answered one question, but unearthed dozens more. How did he evade capture for so long? Was he practicing restraint, or was he hunting all over again? Was his family truly unaware? And most haunting of all, are there more victims out there waiting to be found? Even now, forensic teams are re-examining cold cases across Long Island, Atlantic City, and beyond. Missing women, similar MOs, the same eerie silence. Rex Heuermann has pleaded not guilty to all charges. His trial is still ahead. And while prosecutors say the evidence is overwhelming, the courtroom is far from the beach, and justice, as always, moves slowly. But no matter how this ends, one truth remains. The victims never stopped mattering. They were daughters, sisters, mothers, women with laughter in their voices and dreams in their hearts. And for far too long, their stories were buried. Now we dig them up, not for closure, but for truth. Because until every victim is named, until every killer is caught, the sands of Gilgo Beach will never be still. If this story left you chilled, if you believe the victims deserve justice, and if you want more stories that go deeper than headlines, subscribe. Because here, we tell the stories that others forget. The lost, the voiceless, the victims who still deserve to be heard. Tap the bell icon so you never miss a new episode. Hit like if this case disturbed you, made you think, or made you feel something. And in the comments below, tell us, do you believe Rex Heuermann acted alone, or is there still a second killer hiding in plain sight? Every view, every comment helps bring light to the darkest corners of real crime. This has been OG Crimes, and we're just getting started.